Darth Vader is not the same person at every point in the timeline. The man who takes his first mechanical breath on the operating table is different from the one who stands in the Emperor's throne room decades later. Between those two moments, Vader passes through 7 distinct stages. Each one changes how he fights, how he thinks, and how he relates to the power keeping him alive. These stages are not random. Each one builds directly on the failures and discoveries of the one before it. To understand all 7 levels, we have to start at the very beginning, using both Canon and Legends material. The full picture is bigger and more complex than any single source reveals on its own, and once you see how all the pieces fit together, Vader's story looks very different from what most people think they know. Vader's first level begins in the canon film Star Wars Episode 3: Revenge of the Sith. This is the moment after Anakin Skywalker pledges himself to the dark side. But prior to the suit, the injuries, and the Empire itself, for a brief window, he exists at his highest biological potential, with all 4 limbs, full mobility, and one of the strongest natural force connections of anyone alive. On paper, this should be the most powerful version of Vader that ever existed. In practice, the same film reveals it is the weakest because power without control leads to self-destruction. Revenge of the Sith depicts Palpatine sending the newly christened Sith to the Jedi Temple first. Vader leads a battalion of clone troopers against the temple's defenders, cutting through them with overwhelming aggression. His only strategy is overwhelming force. He attacks with speed and fury, and it works only because the defenders are outnumbered and caught off guard. The film further shows that nearly every swing comes from emotion rather than calculation. The dark side at this stage is not a tool he controls, it is a current pulling him forward, amplifying his anger in a cycle that destroys everything around him without giving him any direction over it. As a result, against targets that are already outmatched, this uncontrolled fury is enough. Against someone who can weather the storm and wait for an opening, it becomes a fatal weakness. This is also the only level where Vader has access to the full range of combat techniques that Anakin Skywalker spent years developing, as established across the prequel trilogy. The fast lightsaber work, the aggressive Form 5 style, and the ability to change direction mid-leap, all of it is available and all of it is used without thought. The film continues with Palpatine sending him to Mustafar to deal with the Separatist leaders. Vader walks into a room full of political figures who pose no real threat, and he defeats every one of them. Once again, the task requires only willingness, and that is the one thing this version of Vader has in abundance. Therefore, what matters next is what happens when force alone is not enough. The climax of Revenge of the Sith provides the answer. The duel with Obi-Wan Kenobi on Mustafar exposes every weakness of this level at once. Vader pushes his former master back repeatedly and matches him in force ability. Obi-Wan fights with discipline, while Vader fights with anger. The duel stretches across catwalks, through control rooms, and over rivers of lava. The duel also reveals that Obi-Wan has another advantage. He trained Anakin. He knows every habit, every preferred attack, and every pattern in his former student's fighting style. Vader has no such advantage in return because he's not reading his opponent at all, he's simply attacking. As that same duel establishes, Obi-Wan does not need to overpower him, he needs to outlast him. When Obi-Wan takes the high ground, a patient fighter would reposition. Vader leaps straight at him, choosing maximum aggression with zero thought. The result cost him both legs and his left arm. As the saga later confirms, this level sets both the ceiling and the floor. Everything Vader could have been is lost on Mustafar. All that he will become starts in the ashes. If this version of Vader had possessed the discipline that later levels would bring, the duel would have ended differently. Now, everything changes. The man who had everything wakes up with nothing. The second level begins the moment the suit is sealed around what remains of Vader's body. Revenge of the Sith shows Palpatine overseeing the reconstruction, mechanical limbs replacing the ones lost on Mustafar, a respirator forcing every breath, and sensors replacing natural vision. The armor is designed purely for survival, not for comfort. That account also reveals that the first thing Vader learns in the suit is that Padme Amidala is gone. His reaction is pure collapse. His last personal reason for everything he did is gone. Whether Palpatine told the full truth is a question that will follow him for years, but at this moment, he accepts it. Because of this, what comes next is something most people would not expect: a Sith Lord forced to relearn how to walk. The Legends novel Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader by James Luceno describes this period in painful detail. Vader must relearn how to move, how to fight, and how to channel the Force through a body that barely responds. The mechanical limbs are strong, but lack natural feel. Tasks that Anakin Skywalker once performed without thinking now require deliberate focus. Luceno's account explains that the respirator sets a rigid rhythm, controlling how fast he moves and how long he can sustain effort. Pain is constant during this period. It never sharpens into something useful, it just dulls everything. The novel also describes phantom sensations from the limbs he lost, a constant reminder of what Mustafar took from him. What keeps Vader functional is the dark side itself. Rage becomes the only emotion strong enough to push through the layers of metal, circuitry, and pain. Without it, he fades into the machine. With it, he can act again. The same novel describes how this rage erupts in unpredictable bursts, leaving him functional one moment and destroying equipment the next. In contrast, the canon comic series Darth Vader: Dark Lord of the Sith by Charles Soule shows early missions where this instability plays out in action. The first major task the comic depicts is Vader hunting down a surviving Jedi to take his Kyber crystal. Vader must defeat this opponent and then corrupt the crystal through the dark side, a process the comic calls bleeding. This is how he builds his red lightsaber, and the effort nearly destroys him. The bleeding process itself, as the comic details, involves Vader pouring his pain, anger, and grief into the captured Kyber until it bends to his will. The crystal resists. It shows him a vision of a different path, one where he rejects the dark side and returns to the Jedi. For a moment, the comic shows Vader hesitating. Then he pushes through, and the crystal turns red. It is a small detail, but it captures the entire second level in miniature. He sees another choice and refuses it. The cost of admitting he was wrong is more than he can bear. However, what the suit takes away in comfort, it begins to give back in a different form. That canon comic also details how officers avoid the armored Sith Lord during this period, not out of respect, but because being near him is dangerous. His earliest combat in the suit is effective but unstable, relying on toughness rather than skill. Blaster bolts strike the armor and barely slow him down. Strikes that would end an unarmored opponent are absorbed entirely. Both sources describe the adaptation following a clear path. First, he discovers what the suit prevents: speed and the fast fighting style he once relied on. Then, he learns what it allows. He can take punishment that would finish any other combatant. He can anchor himself against sustained pressure. He can use his own toughness as a weapon by walking into attacks that force lighter opponents to retreat. Luceno's novel further explains his dependence on Palpatine during this stage. The Emperor controls the medical systems, the information Vader receives, and every mission he's assigned. He has no allies, no outside contacts. The same account explores the psychological damage of this period. He's caught between two identities and belongs fully to neither one. Anakin Skywalker's memories still exist, but they belong to a body that is gone. Vader's purpose is clear, but the mind carrying it out keeps slipping back into grief and confusion. The novel also describes how the suit reinforces this split at every level. The respirator keeps him breathing, but it also ties him to technology the Emperor controls. The neural interfaces connect his nerves to the mechanical limbs, but they create a low-level discomfort that never fades. Nothing about the armor is designed to make him feel whole. It keeps him functional, and it reminds him that he cannot function without it. Still, something important is happening beneath the surface. He is learning what the suit can do, and that knowledge changes everything at the next level. By the third level, the instability of the early suit period has hardened into something colder and far more dangerous. As the canon material from this era confirms, Vader is no longer adjusting to the armor, he has mastered it. The wild bursts of anger from the second level have been compressed into focused, directed aggression. He wastes no energy, and every action has a purpose. Issues 1 through 12 of the canon comic Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith show him during the Jedi Purge in vivid detail. Surviving Jedi are scattered across the galaxy, most of them alone and completely broken. Vader hunts them one by one. These are not duels, they're military operations. He tracks his targets, engages them with direct force pressure, and finishes them. At the same time, what truly separates this level from the previous one is precision. That same source shows that Vader's dark side connection is no longer a survival tool. It has become a weapon he can aim. His combat style has evolved from toughness-based brawling into something far more deliberate. He still overwhelms opponents, but now he controls exactly when and how that pressure is applied. His understanding of fear also deepens during the stage. At the second level, people feared him because he was unstable. At this level, as the comic depicts, they fear him because he's controlled and therefore unstoppable. An unpredictable threat makes people cautious. A precise, inevitable threat makes them surrender before the fight begins. The Purge operations themselves follow a pattern that the comic traces across multiple issues. Early targets are straightforward, a Jedi alone on a remote planet. As the Purge continues, the surviving Jedi adapt by setting traps and choosing better terrain. None of it works because Vader adapts faster. Each hunt teaches him something new about how force-sensitive opponents break under pressure. Now, the canon animated series Star Wars Rebels adds another layer to this picture. The Inquisitors, dark side agents introduced in that series, serve under Vader during this period. They act as a secondary force of Jedi hunters, but Vader is the standard they can never reach. When an Inquisitor fails, or a target proves too dangerous, Vader handles it personally. The series further establishes that Vader personally tests and disciplines the Inquisitors. Their training comes from him, and their failure comes from knowing what he does to those who disappoint him. This creates a chain of command built entirely on fear, with Vader at the top. Across both sources, his combat style during this period is built entirely around forward pressure. He advances without retreating, closes the gap, disrupts his opponent's focus through the Force, and strikes with a technique that prioritizes ending the fight quickly. Against Jedi survivors who are already exhausted and afraid, this approach is crushing. This is the version of Vader that the Empire deploys when all other options have failed. As depicted in the canon material, when diplomats lose control, when regional governors cannot hold a system, the armored Sith Lord is sent. His arrival signals that the outcome is already decided. Yet, even at this level, there's a ceiling he cannot break through. The broader canon narrative confirms he is feared across the galaxy, but he is still a weapon in someone else's hands. Political power, strategic planning, and independent thought all belong to the next stage. The Purge Lord does not think beyond the current mission. One more thing defines this level, as reflected in both the comic and the animated series: silence. The early suit Vader was loud in his instability. The Purge Lord is quiet. He arrives, completes the mission, and leaves. That silence becomes part of the fear, because a controlled, efficient Sith Lord cannot be predicted. The canon comic also reveals that during this period, Vader begins constructing a personal fortress on Mustafar, the same planet where he was nearly lost. The location is not random. As the comic explains, Vader chooses it because the dark side energy there is strong enough to fuel his ongoing connection to the Force. He returns to the place that destroyed him and builds his base of operations on top of it. The fortress becomes another expression of his method at this level, turning pain into a resource. However, being the Empire's most efficient weapon is not the same as being its most dangerous mind. That distinction belongs to the next level. The fourth level is where everything comes together. The strength from the first level, the pain tolerance from the second, and the precision from the third all merge here. The result is a fully realized combatant who also happens to be a strategic thinker. This is the Vader of the canon film, Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. The Cloud City duel is where all of it becomes clear. The Empire Strikes Back shows Vader dueling Luke Skywalker with one hand for most of the encounter. He's not struggling, he is testing. He pushes Luke into more dangerous positions, reads his emotional state through the Force, and controls the pace from start to finish. When he decides the test is over, he ends it. Luke loses his hand and nearly loses his life. The film reveals that this duel goes beyond physical dominance. It is total battlefield awareness. Vader hurls machinery with the Force, lures his opponent onto narrow platforms above a massive shaft, and controls the lighting, the terrain, and the distance between them. Every element of this space works in his favor because he has chosen to fight where the advantages are his. Compare this to the Mustafar duel from Revenge of the Sith. In that earlier fight, the young Sith fought in whatever environment he happened to be standing in. In The Empire Strikes Back, Vader decides when to press forward and when to give Luke room. He decides when to use the Force and when to rely on the saber alone. He even controls the timing of the parentage reveal, delivering it when his opponent is most vulnerable. In the same way, his tactical thinking has expanded far beyond combat. The film also depicts Vader commanding the Imperial fleet's pursuit of the Millennium Falcon through an asteroid field. His officers object, warning that the risk to the fleet is too high. Vader overrules them without hesitation. He is willing to accept losses that other commanders would not, because he understands the strategic value of what he's chasing. The pursuit is not reckless, it is a calculated decision that lesser officers are unable to see. That same account shows Vader bringing in outside resources when his own forces are not enough. He assembles a group of bounty hunters, including Boba Fett, and tasks them with finding the Falcon. This is not standard Imperial procedure. It shows a commander who operates beyond the rules of the system he serves, using any tool available to reach the result he wants. The film further depicts Vader arriving on Cloud City before Han Solo and Leia Organa even land. He arranges a deal with the local administrator, Lando Calrissian, to use them as bait. The entire trap is designed with one purpose: to draw Luke Skywalker in. Vader even tests the carbon freezing chamber on Han Solo first, confirming it will hold a living person without harming them permanently. Every step of the operation reveals a mind that plans several moves ahead. His handling of people reflects this shift in thinking. One scene from the film captures this shift perfectly. Vader force grips Admiral Ozzel for a tactical blunder and immediately promotes Captain Piet on the spot. This is precise management through fear. One example sends a message to every officer in the fleet. Because of this, the fourth level is not just about fighting, it is about control at every scale. Vader also begins planning to replace Palpatine during this period. The Empire Strikes Back makes this explicit when he proposes to Luke that they rule the galaxy together as father and son. This reflects years spent mapping the Emperor's control systems and waiting for the right opportunity. The reveal itself deserves closer attention. When Vader tells Luke that he is his father, as depicted in the film's climax, it is not an emotional outburst. It is a carefully placed piece of information delivered at the exact moment Luke is most vulnerable. Luke has just lost his hand. He's clinging to a narrow platform above a bottomless shaft. As that same sequence shows, Vader offers him a choice: join me or fall. The timing is deliberate. A version of Vader from the first or second level would never have been able to hold that information back and release it at the right moment. This is a man who has learned to use the truth as a weapon. His relationship with the Force at this stage reflects the same calculated control. The film demonstrates that there is no wasted motion in how he uses Force abilities. Objects move exactly where he directs them, The Force flows through channels he has built over decades of practice, producing an efficiency that looks effortless. The Empire Strikes Back also introduces Vader's meditation chamber aboard the Executor, his flagship. It is the only place where the helmet comes off. For brief moments, the scarred head beneath the mask is visible before the shell closes around him again. The existence of this chamber tells us something important about this level. Vader has reached a point where he manages his own condition with the same precision he applies to everything else. It is a tool maintained and used on his own terms, not a sign of weakness. This is Vader's physical and tactical prime, and yet the next level surpasses it. The fifth level is the version of Vader that the galaxy experiences as a force of nature. As canon sources for this era establish, this is not a man working through internal conflict or testing his limits. This is a fully realized predator operating at the absolute peak of what the suit, the dark side, and decades of experience can produce. The primary sources for this level are the canon film Rogue One: A Star Wars Story and the canon animated series Star Wars Rebels. The events in Rebels take place roughly 3 years before the Battle of Yavin, while Rogue One occurs immediately before it. What unites these events is not their timing, but their character. In each case, Vader operates with total certainty. Nowhere is that certainty more visible than in the Rogue One hallway. Rogue One depicts the hallway scene aboard the Rebel flagship as the single most concentrated display of Vader's combat ability in all of Star Wars. The corridor is dark, and Rebel soldiers are trapped between Vader and the only exit. What follows takes less than a minute and is over before anyone can mount a real defense. That film shows Vader using his lightsaber as the only source of light, alternating between saber strikes and force abilities without pause. One soldier is pinned to the ceiling, while another is force gripped and a third is struck aside. Blaster bolts are deflected and absorbed without breaking his stride. There is no rush in his movement. He walks through them with total control, as Rogue One makes clear. Every gap between intention and action has been closed. The soldiers try to pass the data plans through the door before Vader reaches them. He pulls one back with the Force, pins another to the wall, and continues forward. The door itself becomes part of the trap. Because of this, what makes the scene so important goes beyond the body count. The same film demonstrates that there is no emotion in how Vader operates at this level. No satisfaction and no rage, just calm, total efficiency. That absence of emotion is what makes this level more dangerous than any version that came before. Anger can be disrupted, calm efficiency cannot. In Star Wars Rebels, the Malachor confrontation adds another dimension. That series depicts Vader arriving at the ancient Sith temple where Ezra Bridger, Kanan Jarrus, and Ahsoka Tano have been exploring. Vader faces both Jedi at once. Kanan is a trained knight who survived the Purge, and Ezra is a capable Padawan with growing Force ability. Together, they cannot create a single opening. Vader controls the fight from the first moment. What stands out in the Rebels' depiction is the gap between Vader and everyone else. Kanan is a competent Jedi who has survived years on his own and trained a Padawan. Against most opponents, he holds his ground. Against Vader, he's pushed back from the first exchange. The difference is not just power, it is a certainty. Kanan has to think about each move, Vader does not. His responses come before the attacks fully arrive, as if the outcome were decided before the fight began. The series further shows Vader using the Force to seize Ezra's lightsaber right out of his hand mid-combat, turning the Padawan's own weapon against him. It is a display of such precise Force control that it leaves Ezra completely outmatched. Vader treats the 2-on-1 encounter the same way he treats everything else at this level, as a problem with an obvious solution. Then, Ahsoka Tano enters the duel, as the same episode reveals. She's a former Jedi who trained under Anakin Skywalker himself. The clash between them is one of the most intense in the franchise, with both fighters pushing each other to the limit. Ahsoka manages to crack his mask, exposing part of his face. For a single moment, Anakin Skywalker's voice comes through the damaged mask speaker. When the Sith temple collapses around them, Vader survives and walks out of the ruins. In contrast to the previous level, what separates this one is the absence of internal conflict. Prime Imperial Vader, as portrayed in The Empire Strikes Back, was calculating but divided, wanting Luke and wanting to overthrow Palpatine. The Apex Predator has none of that noise. There is only the mission, the target, and the outcome. Both sources confirm this is Vader as the galaxy sees him, not a man struggling with his past, not an apprentice plotting against his master, just an armored figure walking through a dark corridor with everyone in front of him already gone. The limitation of this level, as both sources make clear, is the same one that has defined every stage since the suit was sealed. Vader is still serving someone else. Palpatine still holds the leash. The suit still answers to systems the Emperor controls. Breaking that final chain requires something this level cannot provide: a reason to stop serving. And that reason, when it finally arrives, comes from the last person the galaxy would expect. The 6th level is not about combat, it is about a single act that accomplishes what no Sith Lord, no Jedi Master, and no army in the galaxy ever managed. In the canon film Star Wars Episode 6 Return of the Jedi, Vader removes Emperor Palpatine from power. In doing so, he breaks the Sith. The Sith Order, as established across multiple canon and legend sources, operates under a system called the Rule of Two: one master and one apprentice. The apprentice grows in power until strong enough to overthrow the master, then takes the master's place and trains a new one. This cycle continued for over 1,000 years. Every Sith who ever overthrew their master did it to seize power for themselves. Ambition drives the apprentice. Fear of being replaced drives the master. Return of the Jedi shows that Vader breaks this cycle by removing its fuel entirely. He does not remove Palpatine to take his place, he does it to save his son. To see how this happens, the film's throne room sequence must be understood in full. The throne room sequence begins with Luke surrendering willingly on the forest moon of Endor, and being brought before the Emperor. Palpatine's goal is not to end Luke, it is to turn him. The Emperor goads Luke, mocks his friends, and reveals that the rebel attack is a trap that he has already planned for. Every word is designed to make Luke angry enough to strike first and begin his fall to the dark side. Vader stands silently through most of this, as the sequence depicts. He watches his son being pushed towards the same path he once walked. When Luke finally gives in and attacks, Vader meets him with his lightsaber. The two of them duel, but the fight is not the real contest. The real contest is inside Vader, and the film shows it building with every exchange. As the film continues, Luke eventually disarms Vader and stands over him with a raised lightsaber. Palpatine urges Luke to finish him off and take his father's place, completing the cycle. Luke refuses. He throws his lightsaber away and declares himself a Jedi. The Emperor responds with Force lightning. Palpatine's lightning is tearing through Luke, as the throne room sequence makes clear. Vader watches his son falling. Everything the dark side has taught him says to let it happen. He has spent decades training this logic, and every instinct tells him to stand still. Return of the Jedi holds on to Vader during this moment. The camera cuts to his mask as he looks between Luke and the Emperor. There is no dialogue. There is only the sound of Luke screaming and the steady rhythm of the respirator. The scene gives Vader no words because words are not what drives his decision. What drives it is something that has been buried under 6 levels of armor, training, and obedience. It is the part of him that Luke insisted was still alive. What happens next takes only seconds, but the film reveals it as carrying the weight of every level that came before. The survivor who learned to live inside a suit, the enforcer who carried out orders without question, the hunter who perfected his method, the strategist who mapped every system of control, the predator who became unstoppable. All of that built toward this single moment. And then, Vader makes the choice that changes everything. The sequence shows him seizing Palpatine, carrying him to the reactor shaft, and throwing him in. The lightning destroys the suit's systems as it passes through his body. The suit is a life support machine, and the energy burns through every circuit, keeping him alive. He chooses it anyway. There is no escape plan. The act is final because Vader intends it to be final. What makes this different from every other Sith betrayal in history, as the broader lore confirms, the Sith tradition produces apprentices who overthrow their masters for personal gain. Vader fulfills the shape of that tradition. An apprentice overthrows a master. He does it for someone else, with no ambition, no plan for what comes after, and no expectation of survival. Vader does not overpower the dark side, he steps outside of it. The saga's conclusion confirms that every Sith who ever removed their master did so to rise. Vader removes his master, knowing it will cause him to fall. In falling, he destroys not just the Emperor, but the system that created them both. The prophecy of the Chosen One, as referenced across multiple Star Wars sources, said that one person would bring balance to the Force. Generations of Jedi expected a warrior who would defeat the Sith through strength. What Return of the Jedi actually reveals is simpler. The Chosen One does not defeat the Sith, he makes them pointless. The rule of two requires self-interest to function. Remove self-interest, and the entire structure collapses. This also explains why Luke's approach succeeds where every other challenge failed. Revenge of the Sith showed that Obi-Wan could not reach Vader through combat on Mustafar. Rebels show that Ahsoka could not reach him through their shared history. Luke reaches him by refusing to fight and insisting that the man inside the suit still exists. As the film's conclusion establishes, this is what makes this a level and not just a moment. Every previous stage was defined by what Vader could do physically or with strategy. This stage is defined by what he chooses to do with all of it. But there is still one level left, and it belongs to someone other than Darth Vader. Return of the Jedi shows that the suit keeping Vader alive is destroyed when the lightning passes through it. The life support systems fail one by one, and Vader is fading. He asks Luke to remove the mask so he can see his son with his own eyes. For the first time in decades, the armor comes off, revealing a scarred, pale face that has not seen natural light since Mustafar. As the film makes clear, the face beneath the mask is that of a man who has been kept alive by machines for over 2 decades. His skin is pale and damaged, his eyes are tired, but when he looks at Luke, the expression is not one of pain, it is recognition. For the first time since Mustafar, someone is seeing Anakin Skywalker, not Darth Vader. And Anakin is seeing his son clearly without the red tint of the helmet's lenses. At that point, the film reveals something remarkable. Vader passes. At the end of the film, Luke looks across the celebration on Endor and sees 3 Force spirits: Obi-Wan Kenobi, Yoda, and Anakin Skywalker. Not Darth Vader, Anakin, young, whole, and free of the armor, the damage, and the decades of darkness. He's achieved what the Force grants to only a handful of beings in the entire timeline: continued existence beyond the physical world. What Anakin achieves here is the opposite of everything the Sith spent centuries chasing. As documented across both Canon and Legends material, the Sith's desire for living beyond the physical world runs through the entire history of the Order. Palpatine studied ancient rituals to extend his own life. Darth Plagueis experimented with controlling the boundary between life and its end through the Force. Sith spirits clung to tombs and artifacts, refusing to release their hold on existence. As documented across Legends and canon sources, every method the dark side ever produced for surviving beyond the physical world required control over others. Whether that meant taking another body, binding a spirit to an object, or feeding on the living to sustain those who should have passed, Sith survival always took from others to preserve the self. However, Anakin's survival beyond the physical world requires none of that. The final scene depicts him simply continuing, unified with the Force, free of every limitation that defined his existence. The armor, the pain, and the rage that kept him alive for 20 years are all gone. What remains is the identity that was buried under all of it. The contrast with every other form of survival beyond the physical world in Star Wars makes the achievement clearer. Canon material establishes that Obi-Wan earned his Force Ghost through decades of Jedi discipline. Yoda studied the technique for years. Anakin receives it after a single act of selfless sacrifice, at the end of a life spent almost entirely in service to the dark side. What that tells us is that the Force does not measure the length of the journey, it measures the truth of the final step. There is a deeper connection to the very first level. Revenge of the Sith established that Anakin lost everything on Mustafar because he could not let go, not of Padme, not of his fear of loss, and not of the power he thought would save her. That refusal to open his grip is what created Darth Vader in the first place. The Force Ghost is a mirror of that failure. He achieves his final form not by holding on, but by releasing everything. Every Sith who ever lived tried to escape their own end through power, rituals, anger, and control. As legends and canon sources alike confirm, none of it produced what Anakin achieves by doing the opposite. He does not conquer his own end, he accepts it. The Force, in response, grants him one thing the dark side never could: peace without a price. His voice appears one final time in the canon film Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, among the chorus of Jedi voices that reach Rey during her fight against a returned Palpatine. That moment confirms Anakin continues within the Force and still acts when the balance is threatened. This is where the arc finally reaches its end. The shattered body from Mustafar is healed. The prison of the suit is gone. The hunter, the strategist, the predator, they all dissolve in the same moment. The father saves his son, and in doing so, saves himself. Every level before this one was built on gaining something. The 7th is built on none of it. It cannot be trained into or fought toward. It can only be arrived at by letting everything else go. The Force was never waiting for Vader to win, it was waiting for him to stop. Before we close, we must address a unique visual interpretation that exists outside official continuity: the concept of White Vader. This appears in Star Wars Infinity's Return of the Jedi, a non-canon comic series published by Dark Horse that explored alternate timelines diverging from key moments in the original trilogy. It represents not what happened, but what might have been, a visual metaphor for a different path to redemption. In the Infinity's timeline, Anakin Skywalker's redemption occurs not through sacrifice and death, but through survival and confession. The divergence begins at Jabba's palace, where an accident during Leia's rescue allows Boba Fett to escape with Han Solo. This sets in motion a cascade of changes, culminating in the throne room aboard the second Death Star. Luke and Leia confront Vader together. When Luke reveals that both he and Leia are Vader's children, Anakin does not turn against Palpatine through violence. Instead, he collapses to his knees, overcome with remorse, and begs forgiveness from his children. He rejects the dark side entirely, though the Emperor escapes. Critically, Anakin survives the battle. When he reappears in the aftermath aboard the Home One, he wears a reconstructed version of his life support armor, redesigned in white rather than black. The silhouette remains identical: the helmet, the chest plate, the cape. However, the visual symbolism is reversed. The black armor was forged in pain on Mustafar, a constant physical and spiritual prison. It represented domination, servitude to the Emperor, and the erasure of Anakin Skywalker beneath layers of machinery and Sith ideology. It was a walking tomb that sustained his body while suffocating his soul. The white armor represents purification without escape from consequence. Anakin still requires the suit to survive, his body remains broken. But where the black armor symbolized submission, the white armor symbolizes active rejection. It is redemption made visible, not through transcendence into the Force, but through continued life and the choice to fight alongside his children against the Emperor he once served. This stands in direct contrast to Level 7, the Redeemed Force Spirit. In canon, Anakin's transformation requires his death, becoming a luminous presence freed from his physical body. While Vader exists solely within this alternate timeline as a symbolic construct, the armor transforms from imprisonment into commitment, a visual declaration that redemption can be worn rather than transcended. If you want to know what Vader actually felt after striking down his former master, or why the ancient Sith would have despised him, we covered both on the channel. Make sure to watch them next.